Hello, Parrot Head fans. This is Sean Payton, head coach of the New Orleans Saints. I don't know that it's a prerequisite if you're a Parrot Head that you have to be a Houdat, but I know there are a lot of Parrot Heads that are Houdats. And so we're going to have a special time here today to enjoy Jimmy Buffett. We're going to have some great conversation, a lot of good stories, talk about some of the challenges that we're faced with today, but more importantly, talk about what's it going to be like on the other side when we come through this together. So welcome to our, I don't know if you want to call it a web conversation, but this is a little bit of Margaritaville meets Houdat Nation. That's what we've got going today.
I'm hanging out here for the duration. You know, we're still trying to reschedule events, and hopefully we'll get out, you know, sometime later in the year. We do these little things called Cabin Fever virtual tour. So we're up on Zoom, and we have people come in, and we do like meet and greets online, and we're doing them with healthcare workers and first responders right now who are also members of Parrot Head Club. So we go out and find a 15 or 20 people, and they get to hear us. Like we did last week, it was me and Mac McAnally and Lucas Nelson, and we played a song we wrote together on the new album, and then we played some. So we do those every week.
Outstanding. Those people, and look, my fiance is a nurse, and so each day she heads off. Both her and I had it. In other words, almost 3.5 weeks ago, I'd woken up with just some chills and, normal flu symptoms. And I didn't have any of the respiratory problems, but I got tested that afternoon. It took a few days. And by then she had gotten it. And I'll bet the better part of, call it 4 or 5 days before we were over it or recovered. And then it took another 2 weeks quarantine. And then following that, a test that comes back negative. And so we're kind of like that group that, like, we can't get it and we can't give it. So we can walk right down the middle of High Street if we want to, and into any saloon or any, we're just in a unique position. So she's actually a nurse at her hospital and caring for not only COVID patients, but all of them are elderly COVID in her unit. And, she comes home every day. She's scrubbed. Man, she just had a 101-year-old gentleman pass away. But the stories are amazing, and I get to hear them from her each day when she gets home.
You know, I was down the weekend before Mardi Gras, and I thought, boy, and I was in Tipitinas in full regalia. I thought if I'm ever going to catch this thing, it's going to be here, because I thought about you. And then, but then I was just, so when I got out here, I was just kind of self-quarantined, and nothing has happened so far, knock on wood. So, but it was like, but talking to those folks the way we do, it's amazing. It's such a spirit out there that's, I'm putting my faith in smart people, American ingenuity, and money, and they'll figure this thing out. I hope so. Faster than I think people. People seem geared up right now. They really do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Look, the first week after we cleared, or after we were tested clean and able to go out, we were taking a trip. This is when you could drive to Florida. We were driving to Florida, and we stopped to get gas, and I was in the subway, and she was using the restroom, and I'm in line, and there's two people ahead of me, and they recognize that I'm the coach, but they also recognize, and I know what's going through their mind. They're like, not only is he the coach, but I think he's got, and it's the first time where I'm like, hey, I am the coach, and I tested clean, and here are my papers. and so I found myself for the better part of this last 2 weeks, kind of wanting to carry my medical papers around to say, hey, I'm all right. I'm not gonna hurt you. But I feel like you've seen all of these world events and you and I both have seen 9/11. We've seen shoot here the Katrina. There's been a number of, I think, man, historic events that someday our grandchildren will look at us and say, "Are you kidding me?"
I was talking to a friend of mine who's in medical school at LSU down there and was working, and it was true. He said, you look at the news and you don't really get the real picture. Particularly, he said, yeah, things are bad in New Orleans, but we have been down this road before, and the experience of that is something that you can't duplicate unless you do it. And it seems that New Orleans always figures a way, as funky and wonderful as it is, to get through these things. And if you look historically, it goes back to yellow fever days when almost the whole city wiped out, but still it comes back and comes back. It's not going to go away. It's an amazing kind of fortitude that for some reason exists down there. I believe that.
There's such a grit element that, and look, you were here long before I ever got here, but for me to experience it in a toughness element. And look, I think already in this past week, the news was brighter than anticipated. What they were expecting, man, we were blessed. It wasn't as bad this past week. Now it wasn't great, but it was a lot better than what we were hearing. And so I think people are cautiously optimistic. I know we all are. We got an NFL draft coming up here in 2 weeks that we're going to hold in our houses. I'm actually kind of looking forward to it because every one of us will be in a setup like this in front of our cameras and making draft picks. And then we'll be on a separate call with our GM and with our scouts. And it'll just challenge us a little bit in a unique way, but that's getting ready to happen. I'm with you. I think the experts, and we've done this already, but the experts are going to get us back to a gradual kick back into what we're used to as normal life. And it'll take a minute, and yet I think it'll happen in stages.
We have to figure out a way to get people to feel safe when they go to either a Saints game or to a Jimmy Buffett concert. And I know that there are people working on that right now, because not only
Absolutely.
is it good, there are a lot of Saints fans out there, a lot of Buffett fans out there trying to get this going, and I'm praying for them. I think they're going to make it. Then it'll be the next norm, and they'll figure this out so that fun is part of life in America.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Jimmy, those people that are going to figure it out are the people that went to the Pepperdines of the world, not the schools where you and I went. In other words, they're the people we're counting on right now.
Yes, I got some good friends up in Stanford, and then California kind of led the way in how this thing's going to happen. And, and it's an amazing kind of thing. I remember reading the Steve Jobs book, and they say, about, everything from the Hells Angels to rocket scientists came out of California, and hippies and everything. There's something in the water out here, like in New Orleans, that intelligence wise, I'm going to bank on these folks to figure this out.
So tell me, how is it during these unique times? How is it releasing an album? Lifetime on the flip side's come out, and what are the challenges that present themselves, and then are there benefits? I mean, I know the timing for that Tiger show couldn't have been any better for that Netflix release.
Yes. You never know what the public's going to buy, and they sucked me right in too. And of course, half of it happened in Florida, but
absolutely.
The thing with our album, all of this, like, you're planning ahead for next season, probably before this last season ends. And it's the same way for us, because I hadn't done an album in 7 years, and it wasn't because I didn't want to, but I was busy kind of putting creative stuff into other things, the play and the road and other things. And the other thing was, I wasn't sure whether there was going to be an album demand out there because of the way music was being technically distributed on the internet. So in the middle of thinking about that, but we are a playing band and always have been. And so the first thing we were going to do is say, we're going to Key West. We're going in our little studio down there. I'm going to take some time off and concentrate strictly on writing songs with Mac and Will Kimbrough, my dear friend from Mobile who lives in Nashville, writing partners that I knew, consulting with other friends like Mark Knopfler and my great friend Paul Brady in Ireland. So we got the writing process together. And this is way before any pandemic word was mentioned in our world. And so we were on track to do this anyway. And so we got to Key West and we did it, which was wonderful because us and a band, and the whole process was, we're going to do this record and we're going to be right from there. We're going into rehearsal and we're going to take this new album out on the road. So that was our plan. So we should have been out. We were actually going to rehearse in New Orleans at the University of New Orleans Dome, on which we're supposed to start on May the 3rd. Well, that was the original plan. So that pandemic comes along. So as you know, you have to make some decisions quickly. And fortunately, I think we have proven that we can do that on occasion. So the next thing was the album title in the beginning was called Life on the Flip Side, because living in Key West as long as I had, and my family had a lot of history because my grandfather was a sailing ship captain, and my father and my aunt in Pascagoula lived on the boat, and he was in Havana a lot. So those stories were in our family lore. So that was the flip side to me. Was I traveled to Cuba a lot and done some music exchange programs, and it's kind of a fascinating place. But it's always that history of Key West and Havana. So that was the flip side, was just going over on the other side of the Gulf Stream and taking the picture. That's all I wanted to do. And all of a sudden now, when the album was finished, we thought we had a good record. We really did. And we weren't patting ourselves on the back, but we knew we had something that would work for Parrothead fans, because I don't do this anymore to try to get on top 40 charts or anything. I do it to just, if anybody likes what we do, make something that they can add to their collection. That's all we try to do. And what I did do, as I went back and listened to a lot of those first albums, White Sport Coat, Living and Dying 3/4 Time, A1A, those albums that I was writing and doing when I went to Key West. And so that's why I wanted to go back there to kind of get a sense of those original things, which I think we did in this. So the album, we get it done, pandemic hits, and all of a sudden Life on the Flip Side has a total new meaning that was never supposed to be there in the first place. But, it's like, if the guy's open, throw him the ball. And that's what we did.
Absolutely. Listen, you'll spend years answering that question. Did you name this album after the change in how we live? And it's funny how something like that can just all of a sudden just turn around completely. How the thing about what you do, and I know this is challenging, but there's so many that are part of your tour, your brand, your band, all of these people. How are they handling this time right now? That's got to be challenging.
Interesting thing, the way I'm personally doing it is the fact of it is that I put myself a routine together to deal with the monotony, because a lot of people are asking me, how am I dealing with this? So if I can set that example for my people, that if I'm not freaking out, then we kind of get everybody together. And we said, we were hoping along the way, of course, they were starting to say, okay, we'll go out in June. We'll go out. I didn't believe it, because I said, we're not going anywhere until people feel safe to get back in buildings or go to shows. Sure. And so we have to have an alternate plan here. So we got everybody together and we said, my main thing is I wanted everybody to still stay in contact. And these kind of things we're doing on Zoom and on Vimeo have been, I think, a saving grace that people will, again, as you said, Sean, look back on to say, just having this contact without being able to to be in a room with somebody really helps. And I think this will never go away. Is like in my business, I'm, like you said before, I'm doing a meet and greet with 15 people who've just come back from the hospital caring for COVID-19 patients. And they're talking to us, and I don't want to know about what your day's like. I want to know about what I can do to help you relax for 10 or 15 minutes here. And
absolutely,
I think that it reminds me of the time when I'm old enough to remember Bob Hope doing USO tours, and my dad talking about him in World War II, and nobody ever forgot him for that. And it's, I just think it's a responsibility we have, because we get to live a very lucky lifestyle, and we're dependent on our audience loving us the way how fan loyalty is in that city. It's me being one of the biggest one. And it's something that you want to give back. It's not because you're going to get anything for it. It's just the right thing to do. And so, keeping the band close together so that it wasn't like everybody sitting at home doing nothing. So we're playing online. We're talking about what we're going to be doing when this is over. And, and now it's going to be, it's probably going to be late summer or even later than that. But whenever it is, I keep telling my folks up there, I said, whenever and wherever we do that first show, you better hang on. Because it's going to be something.
You get that sense that everyone knows it's going to come. And it's just a matter of not if, but when. And so then there's that excitement that'll build. And look, there's some obvious sports for us like golf that may segue back a little quicker than some other sports. But relative to what you do, which is stadium seating, arena seating, shed seating, and what we do, which is stadium seating, that's going to come because, look, we're going to get to that safe spot. And I agree. I think there'll be a different appreciation when that happens. And in the meantime, you do find yourself in this wanting to help, give, reach out, just be a part of the solution in your community or with your fan base. And you have such a unique, you have a tribal following. It's not just, it's international. So I can't imagine when word gets out that you've got an album coming out and everyone, and I'm a parrot head as well. I didn't put the parrot hat on because I thought it would really mess with I just felt like I want the parrot hat on when you have that first show. I didn't think it was appropriate to have a parrot head on right now, a hat on. But so many people waited for that moment.
Okay. You're absolutely right. And it is. And that's the thing. I bet you feel it too. It's like, to me, it's a sense of, with the internet, and everybody's got a platform now, and everybody's got a soapbox, and it's like, but it seems that everybody, there's not as much like sarcasm or anger out there right now. It's just like all of a sudden, everybody gets, you can't please all the people all the time, but that's okay. That's just part of the process. But I feel the sense of, because of these things we're doing now, and because this is the only way you can communicate now, people are getting to be a little more or a little less kind of angry, and a little more, like you said, what can I do to help here, instead of just about it. And
right.
And I get a sense of that when we do these shows, and when I talk to other people and and other bands, and you look, and the thing of it is, to me, is in the very beginning, music kind of was the thing that people could cling to in the very beginning of this, when somebody figured out way before we did to do these shows online, so that you could at least get out to your crowd. And I remember seeing the first ones that are up there, and I did one with Caroline Jones, and it was World Citizen, it's called, and a lot of people were doing them, and people didn't know what to do and how to do it, but they just got it together. And you look at the 2-week period, or I've been out here almost a month now, And let's just take that month. And nobody knew what the hell was going on, and nobody had any answers, no matter what they tell you, because nobody knew. But in that month, like, people were able to figure out that it's great to get in touch with people, and technically how they've made it easier to sing or to talk to people online in just a month. And like, we're now working with some people where we can get our whole band together from different locations and play a show together. What the problem was, it still is latency and the delay. It's like singing the anthem in the dome. You got to listen to the echo.
Right. You said that. And look, I think it's
so
certainly,
when they figure that out, it's going to be fine. And like you said, in stages, it's going to come back, and it's going to be, as we're doing these kind of things and broadcasts like this together, that's even going to get better as you said, the smart medical people are working their ass off out there to figure this out as well. Everything's going to move forward, and it just seems like that to me. And everybody's kind of gotten this down, and it's like, okay, this is what we have to do. And if staying home is contributing to getting out of this, then that's what we'll do.
Absolutely. I think this will change. I mean, there's always these cause and effects, but because of what we're learning to do right now, I think that's going to change business platforms as well. I mean, we're learning that, I was skeptical about the draft process and the meetings that we had 2 weeks ago. And then 2 weeks later, I thought, I kind of liked it because I didn't have to deal with Bill, and I didn't have to deal with, I could just put him on freaking mute. And I got a lot less annoyed with some of my scouts when I could just put them on mute and they were in Tennessee or California or Pennsylvania. All of a sudden, I think that just comes with getting older. But we are going to, I think, there'll be certain things that come from this that will not have been planned. It'll just be like, hey, we can certainly function in some capacity this way that we never would have thought we would have, and just the communication and heck, I mean, we've gone through more. There's 2 companies I would have liked to have been a part of at the beginning now, right? And that's the WebEx crew, and then what's the other one? Zoom. I mean, those 2 just sat home and they said, "Wait a minute, we don't have enough. Yeah. We don't have enough employees."
That's exactly right. They didn't know either. It's just like, when I said I like Life on the Flip Side seems like a good album title because of the Cuba thing, but also because I'm old enough to remember that you used to have a flip side of a 45, and if you played it, sometimes they were hit on the flip side. So, and then that went out the way. It's like, and then the next thing I knew, it was a whole different thing, and so you have to go with it,
Yeah, absolutely. You everything can be planned, and yet we've learned this certainly in our lifetimes is sometimes your best plans can go awry, and then it might lead to something even better. How will the fans know, Jimmy, relative to when we segue back into what we know as a little bit more of a normality or normal life? How will your fans know, hey, I mean, the scheduling has got to be something that's uniquely challenging, I imagine. Stadiums, arenas, the tour is going to pick up, and how does that all unfold?
It's like it's probably in your world too. It's almost a day-to-day process now. There's no doubt everybody here, I think, to me personally, it's like, yeah, of course, because you love your job. I love my job. There are people out there that don't love their jobs. And, we're lucky in that respect, but they still go to work. And then we become their entertainment as a part of it. So they can do those jobs that are not necessary, that maybe suck a little bit. So everybody wants it to go back, and everybody wants us to go back. But, and I think that is hope, and that is promise. That is like, it's like they've boiled down the American dream now is to get back to some kind of normalcy where fun and the things that give us the ability to laugh and to relax and to get our minds off of work or world tensions or everything. That's the business we're simply really in, and everybody needs it. And the hope just to get back there, I feel when I talk to people, is very important, because then you know that it is coming, and it will come. And then I think, like you said, Sean, we will be better in, I think, every aspect of life and fun and friendship than we were before, because we lived through this.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And in the end, we'll be better because of it.
Yeah, I do too. And then also every week, I got to tell you, I turn on the 2006 game, and it never, ever gets old.
Well,
they tell you that.
They showed it, they aired it here, and it was the first time. I never watched that game on TV, and probably only watched it the day after on Tuesday. You know, like we get in a routine, and after a game's played, we'll watch it the next morning as a staff, and we'll critique it, and then give it to our players and kind of put closure to it. That's what we do the day after the game, and then we start on the next game. And so I'd never seen any of that game from a television standpoint, and the uniqueness and how much different it was, because when we watch a tape, it's real sterile. There's no noise, there's nothing. You're just watching, and to watch that the other day, Steve Gleason, he asked if a group of us would come on and do live Twitter. And so we all watched, and man, it was completely different. I mean, I'm telling you what, it was so unique watching it from the fans' perspective. And then you realize, I mean, there's a play or two in there in that first series that if we recover the fumble, we never hear about Gleason's punt, you know, his block punt. And look, you're right. I mean, you go back and you relive some of those moments, and you know as well as anyone, because look, I realized this when I got here. I was taking a job to be the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. You were someone who it was certainly a Gulf South expert and a regional expert as to how this city operates and the vibe of this city. And so the cool thing for me was to see people like yourself who've been following this team long before it was chic, or long before it was fun to. Man, to go through that and then see just the faces of those people after Katrina. And look, we just lost, you remember Tom Dempsey, the kicker. Yeah. And yeah. We just lost Tom. He was 76, 78 years old. And I shared this story. When I got hired here, they had me go out to the Saints Hall of Fame and meet with a lot of the Hall of Fame members, but more of a local group in Kenner. And I go back to when I was 9 years old. My father used to take me to training camp in Philadelphia. We'd go see the Eagles practice for a day or two. And that was kind of a cool exposure, because you go to training camp, you get a little closer to the players than you would if you just go to a game. And we probably didn't have enough money to go to a game, so he took me to training camp. Anyway, we would wait by the gate, and as the players came out of the gate, you would try to ask a player to carry their helmet, and they would let you carry their helmet up to the dormitory. That was a big thing. And the first guy that I got to carry his helmet was Tom Dempsey. And I walked with Tom Dempsey all the way back to the dorm, and he was the first person I ever got an autograph from. And I still have it, Tom Dempsey. And I'll never forget it. I was 9 years old. And so 30-some years later, when I was hired as the head coach here, I met him at the Saints Hall of Fame Museum in Kenner. And I said, Mr. Dempsey, I don't want to age you. I said, but you were my first autograph when I was 9 years old. And so that history with this team, and which is really, you have to, it's like this city, really. You have to be here, live here, and appreciate it long enough to where you never want to leave here. And I'm sitting here uptown. I'm not too far from where there's a little tennis match played, I know, once in a while by you. I'm right near Magazine Street, and this is where our base camp is right now.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, in the beginning, when the team, again, one of those things, you never know what's going to happen. I was 20 years old. I couldn't sign a musicians union contract because I wasn't old enough. So the guy in my band had to do it. And we were playing on Bourbon Street. And that was the first year that the Saints had a team. And of course, you know how that goes. It was like cast-offs from every other team. So all of a sudden in town, and all of a sudden people that came to see us were Bill Kilmer, Doug Atkins. I'm going to think, God, who else was in that bunch? But there were 4 or 5 original Saints players that were, let's just say, regulars at the Bayou Room. And so that's how I made my first connection with those. Steve Stonebreaker was one of them, and Danny Abramowitz. I can remember those guys. And
I like it.
Growing up on the Gulf Coast and in the South, football is religion, and always was. So, and then we couldn't wait for the first game. And so I went, and it was at Old Tulane Stadium playing the Eagles. And then John Gilliam ran the kickoff back. And we thought, boy, this is going to be easy.
It's like when they clap for your first song.
And then I went through the years when the Snake was playing, and he and I go way back to Alabama days, and just the whole process of it was. But many years later, I was talking with Sonny Landreth, the great guitar player, and then Sonny works with us, and we've written together, and I'm just one of his biggest fans. And we were talking about that, and I was telling him that story, and he said, well, I was there too. And I said, you were there? He said, yeah. He said, I was a drummer in a band from the high school in Lafayette, and they couldn't get anybody else to play the opening, so they found us. And he played drums in the band at the first game. So that connection goes that far back for me. And as you said, but that's the way anybody down there who is a Saints fan feels. It's like if you were from there and around there, and you went through those times, it's even more worth it. And what you guys have brought is beyond, to me, anything anybody could have wished for. And it just makes New Orleans a better place that you're there, and Mickey and Greg and everybody, your great staff. And it's like, I couldn't do what I do without a great staff of people and people that I trust, and, because I can make some bad decisions.
Well, speaking of some bad decisions now, you brought the subject of bad decisions up, and it's a good segue, because I know Parrot Head Nation doesn't know this story really, and I'm gonna kind of share.
Okay,
I'm gonna share with them. This is a true story, and the one thing I was blessed with is a good memory. But this was a Texas Stadium story, and I'm going to give you the year. I'm going to say it was 04, 05. And you were doing a show at Texas Stadium. Now, Texas Stadium's no longer there, but man, it was in the middle of the summer. It was going to be you, Alan Jackson, and George Strait. The three of you were going to do an all-day sucker. And then this was going to go, I think Alan Jackson came on at around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And then I think George Strait came on at around 6:37, and I think Jimmy Buffett was gonna be the headline there at about, call it 9 o'clock. So it was 10 hours, and it was about 105 degrees. And Mike Zimmer, who's now the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, he and his wife and me and my wife, we tailgated outside with some sandwiches and drinks. That started about 1 or 2 o'clock. And ended up in the stadium, and we ran into, now it's hard to believe these are all NFL coaches, but Doug Marone was sitting right next to us. Troy Aikman was in the front row. We were about in row 8. And sure enough, we get to the main event at the end of the evening, Jimmy Buffett, and I have my parrot hat. I bring it up, put it on my head. Back when you're a position coach in our league, nobody recognizes you. You can do all that. And so, man, this thing just keeps, Jimmy, it just keeps gaining momentum, though. It's getting better and better. It's hotter than can be. And you had this giant inflatable, but it was a blimp of a shark. I mean, it went out with cords, and it was, I guarantee you, someone had to be flying this thing. And it was just not an inflatable. It was as big as a house. And this thing came out over the audience, and I'll never forget it flying over our head when you were playing fins. And so one of us got the idea to grab one of the cords. And as soon as we now this was back behind us about 100 feet in the air, and Doug Marone and myself, and we started pulling on the cords, and this shark started going backwards. It started going backwards. And as it got close to us, we realized that there are propellers on this thing, that there are fans on this thing, and it's probably not too good of an idea. Well, before that thing gets to our head, security meets us in our chair. And they tried to throw Mike Zimmer out of the stadium. We talked him out of it, and cooler heads prevailed. But that was my first exposure to the infamous shark blimp. And I think later you and I shared that story, and you remembered like your end of it.
Oh, I will give you my view of that story very vividly, because yeah, it probably was one of the hottest shows we have ever played. I will never, I'll always go back to Dallas and play because we have great fans, but I will never play it in the summer. After that, let's start there. I think it was 105 regular temperature, and on stage was like 115 with lights. It was hot. And, you don't know who's going to wear who out in those kind of situations, because as you said, you kind of started early, and, you got to figure out where the energy level is for you and for the crowd. So, I'm kind of at that point, it's like the flight's up here. So we're kind of coming in for the landing, and we're knowing, Fins is coming up. We know we kind of got the end. I've got enough juice left to not pass out on stage. So I'm feeling pretty good. And then I saw, we had the blimp, and it had propellers, and we had some engineering problems with that thing early on, and so this was way before drone flying was even around. So we were messing with this stuff. And we had just gotten it right. And what we had it on, I don't know if you remember, but in order to do it, it had to kind of be into the show. So what we were tethered to, what the blimp was tethered to, was a big deep sea fishing rod. And we had one of our acts, one of those, one of our warm-up guys out there like in a fishing suit. So it's part of the show, and he's hauling it in. So I'm watching Wally, and I'm sitting there singing Fins, and I'm multitasking. I'm going, why is the line going down and the shark is moving back? I'm in the middle of singing this, going, but my mind's going, what the hell's going on here? And I look down. And of course, we didn't know each other then, but I knew I saw people hanging on the tether. So I immediately looked at, that's when you met Charleston Miles.
Yes. Head of security.
Security guy. And we have signals too. So I'm up there doing this. I'm looking over here. Charleston's there, and I went, I gave him the look. He saw that. And then and I think he came out there, but you got to tell your side of the story, because I think he kept the local security from throwing you out. Even then, we didn't know. And then somebody told me later that it was coaches from the Cowboys, because that's where you were then. And I went, oh. And then I don't know if Moose Johnson was there, but I saw somebody later after that thing. But I did see y'all hanging on my fish.
So it was Moose Johnson, who of course played fullback for the Cowboys, and he was with Doug Marone, and Doug's now the head coach of the Jaguars. So the two of them were there. They went to Syracuse together with their wives, and they were sitting next to Mike Zimmer and myself, and we were both assistants with the Cowboys. And so you're exactly right. The local security, the Yellow Jackets, were tossing us. Now, the only thing about it was near the end of the night, so they were basically gonna kick us out in the bottom of the ninth inning. And so we convinced them, we're right in the middle of this final song or final part of the set, and your security guy helped us tremendously. And so a year and a half later, I get hired by the New Orleans Saints, and I'm putting a staff together in New Orleans. And Jimmy, post Katrina, there's a lot of challenges that went on, just getting back on our feet. And one of the coaches I'm trying to hire is the line coach at the New York Jets, and his name is Doug Marone. And Doug, I had never met before other than at your concert. And his wife is an attorney, Helen Marone, and she's the smartest person in the room with any room you're in. She's the smartest person in the room. So I'm trying to interview Doug with the Jets' permission, and it's taken me a hiccup. Helen is upset at Doug because this thing's gone on, and she just wants, like any wife, closure. Where are we going to live? Where you want to take me to New Orleans to be where? And Doug's like, it's going to be a great opportunity. He said, Helen, look, Sean Payton's the head coach trying to hire me. She's like, well, who is Sean Payton? He's like, well, he was the guy to our left with the parrot hat on. And she said, he was the guy to our left with the parrot head on. She goes, hell, we'll go to New Orleans. That seemed like a lot of fun that night. That was the icebreaker.
Oh, good.
That's how we got it done.
Well, I'll give a shout out to Doug Marone and his lovely wife for getting him down there.
That they were part of the original 06 staff, and of course he's now a head coach and doing well. But they were on that first staff in 2006, and look, it's times like that where you just remember. But the concert was instrumental in so many ways. And the one little break off side note of that is Zimmer, who's at Minnesota, is the head coach now. All three of us became head coaches, but at that time, none of us were. So Zimmer, his personality is different than I think yours or mine. He's a little bit more introverted, but yet, man, he can be a hothead. He can be somewhat ornery. And so even after your security mitigated or calmed things down, Mike and the local Yellow Jacket kept bantering back and forth, and that kept going and going. And I said, Mike, man, it's all good. Let's finish with this show. We're going to be great. Everything was fine. And about 2 weeks later, we went to another show down at Fair Park. So we weren't at Texas Stadium, and I don't know if it was rock and roll or what we were seeing. And lo and behold, we're with the Zimmers sitting in our seats, and who do you know is the Yellow Jacket in our section? And it starts again with the two of them. And this thing, all of it was born at Alan Jackson, George Strait, in the Jimmy Buffett show at 150 degrees out. It was hot. Well, listen, man, this has been awesome catching up with you. I'm one of your biggest fans, and that was the thing. That was one of the coolest things about being hired here. You inherit at any one of these teams, but I think our team more than any other, just this cult-like following, and you were a part of it. And I was a huge fan of yours long before ever becoming the head coach of the Saints. And then all of a sudden now, our fans don't realize it, but on a gamely basis, I see you to my stage right. All right. And I know right where you're at. And I'll walk down there on that sideline. I'll look at a replay and I'll turn. And every time I have a chance to see you, it's like, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. And so
well, thanks.
I promise you, whenever this thing gets figured out, and it's going to get figured out, I'm going to be on those bongo drums if you have me.
And you know what? We're going to turn the mic on this time.
All right. Well, I'm gonna get ready. When we finish up here, I'm gonna go online to hit some singing courses or Rosetta Stone singing or whatever I need to do. As we close up this show, you got a little gift for our audience here, and we're just gonna get a little, I guess, a
Yeah.
little taste of what.
Well, I thought about this, Sean. It was like, as you're saying there, it always reminds me of, if you look at how serious Katrina was, and the thing of it was, there was a microcosm. This affected the Gulf Coast, but everybody, as when storms come out, they empathize with you. But to be there, to look at the great city of New Orleans with the possibility of it never coming back, was a horror show to any of us who grew up in that culture. But the way you seized upon that and used the team to be basically the angel that came in and saved the city, that's the way I think about it. And the thing of it was that, and then the grit of it all, because if you remember, it was like, I was down there right after Katrina, because at the time, my dear long friend, and Ed Bradley was down there covering it, and I went down to see Ed, and we were housing people and feeding people at the Margaritaville restaurant in the quarter because we had not flooded. But going down there then and seeing everything was like, and then I met with Thad Allen, who was the Coast Guard commander, and with Quint, because even at that point of Katrina, we were thinking ahead, which, if comparisons to today, that's why I still feel very positive about what's happening, because people are getting together and trying to figure this thing out. And there's no better way to look at it than the way people figured out New Orleans, as you said, is this city going to be here again? And I remember that, watching the 2006 game, when the commentators, and I can't remember who it was, were saying, this is a great starting point because it's still kind of funky outside. And the thing of it was that comparison to now still rings true to me. And the thing of it was that we were talking about Jazz Fest. The storm was still in the stages of the rage, and people didn't know what was going on. But we had to think that far ahead. And Quint was saying, well, do we do Jazz Fest? And, Admiral Allen had really, he had really kind of, knowing as common on the Coast Guard dealing with disasters, his opinion was incredible. You got to have certain things in place. You got to do this. You got to have people to stay. You got to have hospitals. He's going through the list of what wasn't there. And I'll never forget, at one point, Quint looked up with the tears in his eyes. And he said, this is all we have right now. And that's when I said, we have to do Jazz Fest. And I agreed with him, and then we convinced Admiral Allen that, whatever happened there. And then at that time, I thought, it's not that people always want to come because if they're Jazz Fest fans, but they need to come now. And it was following in the wake of how people dealt with 9/11 to Katrina, to the way what I see happening now in these stages. It's going to follow that path, which I think is a good path. So this is a song I wrote with my drummer, Matt Benton, and I wrote it for Katrina people in that day. It's called Breathe In, Breathe Out, Move On. And so, yeah, it's early in the morning out here in California, so I don't know how the vocal performance is going to be here, but hell, we'll do it anyway. I bought a cheap watch from the crazy man floating down canal. It doesn't have numbers or moving hands. It always just says now. Now you must be thinking that I was had, but this watch is never wrong. And even the warranty always says, breathe in, breathe out, move on. And it rained. It was nothing really new. And it blew. We've seen all that before. And it poured. The earth began to stray. Pontchartrain, creeping through the door in the Second War. Now you might be thinking that I was had, but you would just be wrong. Don't try to explain it, just bow your head. Breathe in, breathe out, move on. And it rained, that was nothing really new. And it poured, drinking Pontchartrain, Pontchartrain, pouring through the door to the sad Ninth Ward. According to my watch, the time is now. The past is said and done. Don't try to explain it, just bow your head. Breathe in, breathe out, move on. Don't try to explain it, just bow your head. Breathe in, breathe out, move on. Who dat?
Man,
Thank you, New Orleans. Thank you,
outstanding
Coach.
stuff.
Breathe in, breathe out.
All right,
move on.
Jimmy. I love you. We'll
Thanks.
see you.
All right, love you too, man. Bye-bye.